We have finally arrived to the Final Four of the NFL playoffs. That's right. We have Bills, Chiefs, Washington, because I will not utter the word Commanders, and versus the Eagles. Now let's get to it real quick. The Chiefs, obviously on their way to a three-peat, trying to achieve the three-peat. The Bills, Josh Allen seems to be our last hope. Obi-Wan, Josh Allen, you are our last hope against the evil empire. And if you don't do it, well, then I guess that means you died. And Luke Jaden Daniel Skywalker will probably be the one, our only hope to be able to stop the evil empire and Darth Mahomes. Now, the Bills are on a roll when it comes to the turnover game. They have not had the ball turned over since week 11, since that Bills game. And for 21 straight weeks in the NFL season, including the playoffs, they have led the turnover margin in each single game. Now you have the Eagles. A hurt hurts. Doesn't spell victory for the Eagles. But Jaden Daniels, he's on a roll right now. Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury and company have unlocked something in this team, and they are ready to roll. Folks, this is episode 49, and we are live for the first time ever. This is your weekly edition of Box Scores and Bourbon.
Look at the box scores.
Box Scores
and Bourbon.
We check each other's box scores and scores online.
Baseball, Box Scores.
So football, baseball, basketball, soccer, hockey.
Box Scores and Bourbon.
Manny,
JB,
let's cheers
welcome.
ourselves in.
Cheers.
Let me, hold on.
Oh, we're not quite ready.
Oh.
Ah, the sweet sound of a whiskey pouring into a glass.
That's right. I got this 120 proof.
Ooh. We'll
Yeah.
talk about it later. For now,
Yeah, we will.
cheers us into the episode.
Cheers, bud. Clink, clink. Salute. That's nice.
Yes, it is.
Mhm.
Well, JB, we're here.
We are here, and let's take a moment of silence for only 3 more football games left until the fall. Silence done. Now, let's get to talking about this Sunday.
Yes, I can't wait. I'm actually excited for these matchups. One, for the obvious clash of the Titans that we tend to get accustomed to, that is the Bills and the Chiefs running into each other in the playoffs at one point or another. But for number 2, the great run that we have going on in the NFC, with the NFC East being well represented. No, not by the Cowboys, but by the Commanders and by the Eagles. I'm very excited for both of these matchups for very distinct reasons. But we'll jump into the more outstanding matchup, which is the Bills and Chiefs. JB, how do you feel about this matchup?
I feel optimistic. Okay, I am. What was it they used on Election Day? Nauseously optimistic. So this is. I'm a big believer in Josh Allen. I'm a big believer in what his growth as a quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. There was a moment in that Ravens game where he would have pitched the ball back, and he didn't. Yeah. Old Josh Allen would have done that. Old Josh Allen would have tried to squeeze out every bit of juice from that play of an orange and tried to make something magical happen, but he held on. He did not do it. Had a comical response to it in postgame. But
loved the response.
Here's where I'm most optimistic about the Bills' chances against the Chiefs. So in the 2020 AFC Championship game, it was, I think the Chiefs scored 44 points. The 21 AFC Divisional round, the Chiefs scored 38 points or 36. And then in the 23 Divisional round, they scored 27. The Chiefs won all 3 of those games, of course. I don't think the Chiefs even score the low point of that 27. The Chiefs have
Wow.
been so good that they have been competent on every side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
But there is something about this Chiefs team that because they are so much more competent, it's almost as if they have sacrificed the Harlem Globetrotterness of that offense in order to just be a more complete team. They don't make mistakes.
That's right.
But
They
a team
don't.
that does not make mistakes is Buffalo. The Bills do not make mistakes. They do not. Not only do they not turn the ball over, but if you turn it over, you're paying for it. That's it.
That's
And
true.
so I feel, like I said, nauseously optimistic about Buffalo. This is Josh Allen's year. It is his year. I've been reliably informed you can manifest things into the universe. Universe, this is Josh Allen's year. Hear me roar. But we'll see. Because
What
it's
we have to
still
see,
the
what we have
two-time
to see is
defending
Josh
world
Allen's
champs.
roar. Josh Allen keeps running into Mahomes, and somehow his roar seems to not be strong enough to get past that hump. This is giving me a lot of nostalgic feelings, going back to the days of Tom Brady and Peyton Manning always running into each other in the playoffs. Obviously, Josh Allen being more of the Manning of the two matchups, considering it took him 4 matchups to finally get through Tom Brady. I feel like we're on a very similar trajectory with Josh Allen and Mahomes, and
Yeah.
I feel cautiously optimistic in the same way that you feel cautiously optimistic. But I've been
No, I feel
wrong
nauseously
before.
optimistic.
Oh, you feel nauseously
Nauseously.
optimistic.
Yeah.
Well, I'll feel cautiously. One of us has to stay somewhat able to be conscious and not puking. But you're right about both sides. The Chiefs have figured out a way to not necessarily have to have one side of the ball or one phase of the 3 phases dominate their team to be able to fight to get wins. They've shown us time and time again, all regular season through the playoffs, that they don't need to rely on their offense. They definitely didn't need to rely on Patrick Mahomes this year. Their
Yeah.
defense has carried them at certain times, and even sometimes their special teams. Just look at the divisional round matchup against the Texans. The special teams started off literally the game by returning the kickoff to 60 yards, 70 yards. He ended up fumbling it, but they recovered it. But ultimately, the Chiefs just have found a way to be well-rounded in all 3 phases, and I could say the same thing about Josh Allen and the Bills. They found ways to be competent, stay in close games. Here's my thing about the Bills, though. Like you said, they don't make mistakes. The Chiefs don't make mistakes. So the team that did make a mistake was the Ravens in the divisional round matchup. And when you put that kind of situation in front of the Chiefs, if that was the Chiefs, we would not be having this conversation. The Bills would have lost last week if they were playing against the Chiefs in that matchup. So what I'm getting at, the Bills have to make sure that even when they're not going to make mistakes, they have to be on they cross every single T, dot every single I, because you can't rely on the same thing that happened last week to get you through the hump, to get to the Super Bowl. You can't bank on the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce dropping the ball in the goal line to tie that game. That's not something that you're going to be able to rely on. And I'm weary because of how close that game was, considering how well of a game the Bills played. They played a well-rounded game across the board against the Ravens. If that's how close it was against what I would consider almost a perfect game by Josh Allen and the Bills, what is it going to look like when you have to go against the gauntlet of the Chiefs? Is it going to be that close? Are you going to be able to keep up with them? That is where my concern comes from. When you played perfect, it was still only a 2-point game.
Yeah, what surprised me the most in the juxtaposition between how the Bills won and how the Chiefs won is in the Bills game, they played almost Josh Allen wasn't even at his best in the pocket. This was Josh Allen, 10 carries for 20 yards, but 2 touchdowns. So when push comes to shove, when they're in the red zone, Buffalo's going to score. They will score because you're not going to stop James Cook, Ray Davis, and Josh Allen. You're not going to stop it. But in the Chiefs game, it surprised me so much. Yeah, Travis Kelce went off for, I don't know, 1,000 yards, give or take 500. But, like, the Texans left him wide open every single time. Every time. Who is
Yeah.
the Texan safety? Al Shahir? He blew coverage on Kelce. I think on two of those big plays, he blew it,
Yeah, he was
especially in
wide
the
open
end
in the
zone.
middle of the field. Yeah.
In the middle of the field, especially in the end zone, when Mahomes is going down, he's going down. He's literally 2 inches from the ground. And Al Shahir's just like, wow, that is a wonderful backdrop to Arrowhead. That is, oh, that's, Travis caught the football. Like, this is, like, it's just, it was asinine to watch it. Now, I didn't think the Texans were going to beat the Chiefs, but I didn't think it was going to, and the score indicated that it was a little bit closer. That game was far apart. It was way far apart. Texans didn't even stand a chance in that football game, given how the back six played on the defensive end of the football. And when you go to the Bills game and you see them against the Ravens, the problem with the Bills is that they allow the game to come to them, and eventually they figure it out. Now, I'll give them this. They held Derrick Henry to under 100 yards, but he's still like a 5-yard average. He was 16 for 84, so it's not like they stuffed him at all. But they did enough to where they had to put the game on Lamar's shoulders, which unfortunately led to Mark Andrews dropping that ball. Mark Andrews, one of the best dudes in the NFL, just overall dropping that ball. That he is sure-handed. 4 drops this season. 2 of them came in that game. So it's not. Look. The Bills took advantage of opportunities, and we know they can do that. And so it's just it's going to take, and the Chief receivers dropped a few balls in that Texans game that they should have caught. They were wide open, and they didn't. And this is going to be something to where the the Bills are not going to allow advantages when Chief receivers drop the football. They're not going to allow that to negatively affect them. They will capitalize on that.
They will. I agree. It's just, if you're gonna bank on that kind of situation as the Bills, what I'm getting at is you can't bank on the Chiefs making those types of mistakes, especially if they've had that what some would consider a rusty game. Maybe it was because they had that week off and they were trying to get back into their groove from being almost off for almost a month. If you're gonna bank on the Chiefs making mistakes, it's not a bet that I would be willing to take. I'm not saying on the Bills have enough on the offensive side. They do. It's on the defensive side because, like what you just said, they still showed some cracks in their defense. All of the Derrick Henry being able to break through the middle and get some explosive runs, get average 5 yards a carry. That kind of stuff is concerning because the Chiefs, for as what average of an offense as they've had, they still have weapons, and all their weapons are only getting healthier. And they're gonna find a way to click. And like I said, there's no way I would bank on the Chiefs making those types of mistakes. I'm not gonna bank on Hopkins dropping those types of passes or missing those kind of catches. Kelce, we already know who Kelce is. I'm not gonna bank on him having a bad game where he has multiple drops in the game or anything of that sort. The running game, getting healthy. Isaiah Pacheco's trying to find his groove, and then they have Hollywood Brown and what's the rookie's name? I'm blanking on his name, but
Xavier Worthy.
Thank you, Xavier Worthy. He has flashes where if you go unprepared against that matchup, he will burn you deep. If not, they'll get him on open in the short passing game, and he's explosive enough to get those kind of plays to turn into big gains. That is where my concern lies on. I don't necessarily have concerns on the Bills' offensive side, more of on the Bills' defensive side, because, like I said, it came down to a dropped pass from Mark Andrews, which you would never expect to happen for you to not be playing overtime against the Ravens, and who knows what that would have looked like.
Right. But to caveat to what you said, to counter that, even if the Ravens tied, they're only at 27 points. What the Bills did against this high-powered offense, The Ravens have weapons for days all over the field. And the fact that they only held them to 25, let's say, theoretically 27 points, I think that's huge if you're Buffalo. If you're a Buffalo fan and you're going to the Chiefs game and you're seeing the Chiefs win games with point totals of like 19 and 23, this is like, it's not like you look at that and yeah, the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes. Okay, they have Mahomes, they have Kelsey. That is a lethal combination. But if you can come out of that Raven game and understand that you beat a high-powered offense by 2 points, your quarterback threw less than 130 yards. He had, I think, 160 yards, 150 yards of total offense. So, and you still won. And so this is an opportunity for Buffalo, and they've already said Sean McDermott has just run the team through normal drills. Nothing has changed. And why would you change anything? Why would you? And because if I'm Buffalo, I'm thinking we can do this. And Deion Dawkins is going on a PR tour like none other that I've ever seen. He is speaking for the Bills at every chance he can get. I think he stood on the corner of Central and just stood on the box and started talking about how great the Bills are going to be. So like I said, I'm nauseously optimistic, but I think the Bills can do this. I think they can. And the reason that and the hard line reason I think they can is because people give the Buffalo defense not enough credit. Buffalo's defense is not it's not this like handicap that it has been in the past. Like they're in the top half of the league in total defense, I believe. And so it's not, and you saw it against Baltimore. You saw Baltimore get limited to 25 points, coming down to a 2-point conversion. If Buffalo can do that against Baltimore, I have no reason to doubt that they can do it against Kansas City. The only thing is, if you can have the safeties play shallow, or have, I don't know, like an inverted 2 or something, to where it makes it look like they're going to blitz, but they're not. They're going to stay back. And then you can have the linebackers and then even the safeties stay there in the middle of the field. Because honestly, when Mahomes gets in trouble, he's not chucking the ball downfield. He's throwing it in the middle of the field. If Buffalo can have discipline to stay in the middle, at least 2 guys to stay in the middle, and to into whatever zone they're going to play, and stay in the middle, I think Buffalo will be just fine. I think Buffalo will pull out. I'm not saying it's not going to be a nail biter. I'm not saying it's going to be scary if you're a Buffalo fan. I'm not going to say it's going to be, all roses and unicorns for Bills fans watching this game. It's going to be hellacious watching this. It's hellacious me talking about it. I'm not even a Bills fan.
Yeah.
So, but if Buffalo can have that defensive discipline to stay in the middle of the field and not get sidetracked with all these gimmicks that are going to come out from this Andy Reid offense, Buffalo should come out on top.
We're talking about a whole lot of ifs and coulds and should'ves. We have talked enough about this matchup. We need to lock in our picks. Jay, are you going with the Bills to finally get through the Mahomes dynasty to make the Super Bowl?
I am Princess Leia. Josh Allen is Obi-Wan. Josh Allen, you are our only hope. So yes, I have Buffalo overcoming Kansas City and ending the three-peat journey for Kansas City.
Now, do you think it's going to be a close game? How close of a game do you think it's going to be, if that's the case?
I think it's going to be really close. I think Kansas City wins by 4.
No, the Bills. You just said the Bills.
I mean, I'm sorry, Buffalo. I think Buffalo win. Not by 4. 24-19, Buffalo.
Wow, really low scoring game.
And that's what shocked me, is that the over/under for this game is 48.5.
Yeah.
I mean, it comes close to 48.5, but I don't think it goes over that threshold. I think the weather, I
Mm-hmm.
think the defensive battle that these two teams are going to go at and just completely wreck each other. I think 24-19 Buffalo.
When it comes to my pick, so during the regular season on the first matchup, I said I'm I would be a fool to pick against the Kansas City Chiefs, and they ended up losing to the Bills. And now I'm sitting here saying I'm probably a fool if I don't take the Kansas City Chiefs to win this game. That being said, my gut tells me this is 4 matchups running into the Chiefs. It has to be this year. It really does. And my gut tells me they find a way to get through. Josh Allen has had probably an MVP season. If it's not for some crazy voting that happens here in the next couple weeks,
Mm-hmm.
if that's the type of season that it's going to take for you to get through the Chiefs, that is what it's going to take. But my gut tells me that the Bills can finally make it happen. I doubted my gut last week, and we'll talk about the divisional matchups on the other side. But I doubted my gut last week when it came to the Commanders and Lions game. I flip flopped, and I doubted my gut. I'm going with my gut. I'm gonna lock in the Bills getting through the Chiefs and making it to the Super Bowl since 1993. That's the last Super Bowl appearance.
Yes.
So that's where I'm gonna go with.
Yeah. I agree.
What about on the other side? Commanders.
Woo! This is a tricky one
Yes, it is.
because I was at the Padre Cigar Lounge before I hopped on today, and
Shout out Padres.
I was talking to a guy, and he asked me about the Washington Eagle game, and I said that if the Eagles play like they did against the Rams, where the Rams had an opportunity at the end, Washington is going to run away with this game. They will win this game because there's not a weapon that Washington possesses that is inferior to what the Rams have. And the X factor, and it's weird calling him an X factor. The X factor in this game is going to be Jalen Hurts, and more specifically, his knee.
Mm-hmm.
Like if Jalen Hurts plays like he did against Green Bay, and then again and he got incrementally better against Washington. I mean, against LA. So if they gave him a day of rest, he was at full practice today. So I don't see Jalen Hurts not showing up for the moment. I don't. I've loved the Washington story. I've doubted Washington once before, and it cost me greatly. It cost me my pride and one half of my Super Bowl pick. So I think I'm still going with the Eagles. I'm going with the Eagles to win this game because as much of an X factor as Jalen is, Saquon Barkley is still a human being on this planet. And there's nothing that's going to stop him. Nothing is going to stop Saquon. Absolutely nothing. And so this dude had 6 rushing touchdowns of 60 yards or more, including the playoffs. This dude is on another level. Another level. And the people can sit there and say, oh, if he was on the Giants, he'd do the same thing. No, not really, because the Giants O-line sucks. This is why they cut their quarterback that they paid oodles of money to, which wasn't all guaranteed, but still. Like, this is an O-line that is dominant. Not as dominant as years past since Jason Kelce left, but it is dominant. And Saquon is going to bust some runs wide open. And it's because of that I believe the Eagles will prevail. What say you, Manny?
I am also torn because just like you, the Commanders messed up my picks. And like I said, my gut told me to pick them, and I didn't trust my gut. My gut's not really speaking to me on this matchup. When I was watching the Eagles game last week, I told my brother-in-law, we were watching the game together, I said, if the Eagles lose this game against the Rams, it's going to be because of the weather factor. Because weather leads to sloppy game. No matter how good of an offense you play, no matter how good of an offense you run, bad weather is hard to play through, and it did end up leading into a very messy game on both sides of the ball, by both teams, and the weather is what ended up making it for giving the Rams a chance to win that game at the end. That being said, the weather is supposed to be once again very similar to last week. It's going to be, if not the same. Maybe they won't get 4 inches by halftime this time of snow, but either way, it's supposed to be pretty much the same. The X factor for me on this game is Eckler, because against the Lions, he was the deciding factor on the plays when they needed a play. If it wasn't Ertz, it was Eckler. And every single time, Jaden Daniels knew where Eckler was going to be. If he can find those gaps in the defense, in the Eagles' defense, he's going to decide how this game goes. Some people can judge me and say, well, no, the X factor really should be Jaden Daniels. That's sure. He's been playing great. I haven't seen anything in the playoffs that would tell me he shouldn't be the X factor, but at the same time, what I'm seeing, and I'm not a coach, the Eagles are also seeing. So I could assure you the Eagles defense is going to be prepared to account for Jaden Daniels in a way that the Lions probably weren't capable of doing because of all their injuries. That is not going to be the same when it comes to this Eagles defense. They're going to be prepared to handle Jaden Daniels. So Jaden Daniels is going to end up having to rely on where Eckler is going to be and what kind of explosiveness he's going to have in the running game, and especially in the passing game. If he can be open whenever Jaden Daniels is looking for his guy, or whenever the pocket is collapsing, because that the Eagles defensive line is not one to mess around with. That I know they're going to put pressure on that line and going to start collapsing that pocket for Daniels. If that ends up happening, Eckler has to find a way to be explosive when he gets the dump off passes, or he gets the pitch outs, or even the read options. He has to find a way to take advantage of the focus that Daniels is going to get. After me saying all that, as much as it hurts me, I have to believe that it really hurts me a lot to say this. Doesn't happen too often that a rookie leads their team to the Super Bowl, because it's so hard to be at that level of expertise to get to the Super Bowl. So I'm going to go with the Eagles getting past the Commanders, as much as I don't want to. And I prayed that the Lions won last week, because I felt like the Lions had a better chance to take down the Eagles than the Commanders do. And I'm going to stick with that. I feel like they just have more pieces. Like you said, Hurts is going to see. We're going to have to see how he plays on that side of the ball. He's going to be the matchup that I think is going to matter more, because if we're sitting here talking about Saquon Barkley, I can assure you the Commanders are going to be focusing a whole lot of their attention on Barkley. So what is Hurts going to do to counter that attention? Is he going to be explosive on the run? Because that's a key part of his game. Hurts does way better in that offense whenever he can run with the ball, or where he can run outside of the pocket and do impromptu plays with his receivers and know where AJ Brown is. Hurts and Brown tend to be on the same page when it comes to those off-script plays. But is he going to be able to do that with the condition that he's in? You mentioned that he's fully practicing. That could mean one thing or another, but I think that is going to be the deciding factor, and I think will be enough. And as the last thing that you mentioned is also true, even with all the attention that Saquon Barkley is going to get, I still expect him to have the type of game that he's had literally all year long. You can say the focus is going to be on stopping Saquon Barkley and stopping the run, and people say, well, if they find a way to stop the run, the Commanders have a chance. Well, nobody has stopped the run all year long. Nobody has stopped Saquon Barkley all year long. I'm not expecting somebody to randomly be able to do that. I get that they're playing with tough money, but at the end of the day, for 20 weeks, 17, 18, 19 weeks, nobody's been able to stop him. I'm not expecting all of a sudden in 1 week to prepare for the Eagles like the Commanders are going to be able to do what no team really did all year long. So as much as it breaks my heart to say, I expect the Eagles to be in a Super Bowl once again.
Yeah. As much as the Rams defense, not the Rams defense, the Eagles defense. The Eagles defense, this is going to be the point where you are glad that you had to throw Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell into the mix in the secondary in the middle of the season. Because having those two in the secondary is going to be able to counteract with how much of a safety blanket Scary Terry is for Jaden Daniels. And let's not forget, like, one of the defensive players of the year that's up for this award is a linebacker for the Philadelphia Eagles, and he is a former New Orleans Saint, Zach Bond. Zach Bond is absolutely brutal. And paired with Jalen Carter, on that front four, I'm not saying Jaden Daniels isn't going to have success, being able to scramble and to make some plays, but this is going to be something where it's going to be a problem for Washington because this Eagles defense has improved throughout the season because they've had to play Quinyon, because they've had to play Cooper, and because of the mere fact that Jalen Carter and Zach Bond are also on this defense. And it is a cohesive unit. So if it fails for where Jaden has to run out of the pocket, let's not just assume that they're just going to throw the ball downfield and have a field day against the Eagles. It's not going to happen. And so it's because of all the ancillary parts of Philly that I'm picking Philly. I think Philly's defense is going to rise to the occasion here because it seems that no one can stop Jaden Daniels. I think and I'm not saying they're going to stop him completely now at this game, but they will. I think that the Eagles defense will do enough to contain Jaden. And I love Jaden. I'm a Louisiana boy. All right, I've been an LSU fan for years of my life, and I remember seeing Jaden first year he was at LSU, thinking, "Can this kid even throw the football?" To the second year, him win the Heisman Trophy when LSU was absolutely abysmal, and now seeing what he does with Washington, and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a believer in this kid." But I think Philly, that defense does enough to contain him.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess we're on the same page where we have a Bills-Eagles Super Bowl prediction on Box Scores and Bourbon, which could be a good matchup. I feel like those two teams will match up really well. Once we get through this weekend and we actually see the matchups, if we're correct, we'll dive deeper into the matchup itself and what we expect that game to look like. But let's talk about the games that happened last week. And my question to you, JB, is, besides the Lions losing, was there any surprises about the way the games went for you?
No. There were disappointments. That Houston game was most notably the biggest disappointment for me. I didn't think Houston was going to pull away with that game at all. But the fact that they let Travis Kelce run around on them as if he was the only kid on the playground, shouting in the neighborhood, "Somebody please come play with me." Other than that, there were no surprises other than, like you had said, the Washington game. That surprised me. That did.
Right.
But other than that, no.
Here's the thing. We can dive into the Lions game a little bit because I think it's worth noting and giving it a little bit of attention because, yeah, we both expected the Lions to win that game, but the way they lost that game is worth noting because the Lions had done such a good job all year at having their players cover for all their lapses with all their injuries. On the defensive side, they had done such a good job with their schemes to be able to make up for all those injured players. And I did not expect them to not have a single response to anything Washington was throwing at them. They could, when I made my prediction, as far as my original prediction that I ended up backtracking on, that I to this day will regret. When I said I have a feeling Washington will be too much to handle for the Lions because of the RPO, because of how explosive they can be when it's hard to read Daniels with that running game, and if he pulls the ball out of Eckler's hands and decides to throw it, that the Lions really didn't have any kind of answer for that kind of offense. And no matter what the down and distance was, the Commanders always, even when the Lions felt like they were in a good scheme, when they were forcing them to third down, when they were forcing them to fourth down, they just didn't have a good read on what that offense was pulling out on them. If they thought they had a read on what that drive was looking like, the Commanders had a counter to what the Lions defense was playing towards, and I don't think there was a single fourth down that the Lions were managed to stop the Commanders. I think they went for it 4 times on fourth down, and every fourth down that they went for it, they converted, which for me was very surprising because of the way that the Lions have played all year. You would think, with the way that they're being aggressive all year long, and the fact that the Lions have been the team that always went for it on fourth down. That was like the mantra of the Lions. We don't want our players to be afraid of fourth down, so we're always going to go for it. You would think on the defensive side, you would be able to be practicing and be preparing for a fourth down coverage when it's fourth and short, and they did not have a single answer for that type of play style when it was in their faces. That's the part that surprised me the most, and I was in awe because the Commanders never folded underneath the pressure, but at the same time I was in shock because the Lions just seemed to not be prepared for that type of offense, when that is almost the type of offense that they've been playing themselves all year long. It blew my mind that they didn't have the proper matchup across the board to be able to account for the offense that they've themselves have been running all year long.
Yeah, but what I think the deciding factor in that game was when you have, what was it, 5 turnovers, and then you have 4 if you don't include Jameson Williams' interception. Like
Yeah.
if you when Jared Goff turns the ball over 4 times, 4 times, that's going to hurt you. It is. I don't care who you are. That's going to hurt you. And Washington does a good job at capitalizing on mistakes. They went a whole week talking about how just aggressive and risky Detroit was on fourth down. Washington is just as good on fourth down, and it's amazing to me how we can come out of this game and no one alludes to or even highlights the fact that Goff had 3 picks and he lost a fumble. So this is it comes down to ball control. And I'm going back to the Buffalo game. If it comes down to ball control, there's a good chance you're going to win the football game. If you win the turnover battle, you're going to win. And if you give the other team 5 free opportunities to drive down and score points on you, you can't be surprised by it. You can't be. And that's really, in essence, what came back to haunt Detroit. Was it the Texan game where Goff had 5 interceptions? There was a game Goff had 5 picks. I think it was the Houston game.
They still won the game. Yeah.
They still won the game, though. But when you have, and no disrespect to C.J. Stroud, but Jaden Daniels was playing on another level this year, and his connection with Scary Terry, it's just it is something that is beautiful to see. But and then when your defense just kind of, and then speaking of Scary Terry, when you have 3 receivers on the far side, and you have 2 corners, or a corner and safety, playing 10 yards deep, it seemed, and you have that linebacker who shows he's going to blitz before the ball is even hiked. What did you actually think was going to happen? That's got screen written all over it. And I'm surprised Aaron Glenn didn't pick it up. I'm surprised he didn't have his defense call an audible. Because it was clear as day what was about to happen. And then what happened? Scary Terry, 70 yards for a touchdown? Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy to think about just how much, and it's not even that much insane to even consider when you make those types of mistakes outside of the turnovers. When you make those mistakes on the defensive side of the ball, you will pay for it. You will pay for it, especially when the offensive end has playmakers that can turn those 2-yard pitchy catches for 70-yard touchdowns.
Yep. So here's my question to you. The two key matchups that we've been talking about was the Lions game against the Commanders, and we touched on the Ravens game against the Bills. Where do both of those teams go now? One, on the Ravens.
Baltimore and Detroit?
Yeah. And we'll
Okay.
talk about the Ravens first, because the Ravens supposedly had all the pieces this year. They had a running game. They didn't lose their identity in the playoffs. They still fed Derrick Henry in the run game the entire playoff run that they had, 2 games or whatever how much you want to call that a run. But Lamar Jackson had arguably his best season as a quarterback, and he has 2 MVPs prior to the season, and yet people are still saying this was his best season as a quarterback. You have your receivers. You stayed healthy all year long. The issue that we had with the Ravens for the last few years was that they always caught the injury bug. For the last 2 or 3 years, they always caught the injury bug. That didn't happen this year. No. You had a strong running game. You brought in a great running back. Lamar Jackson had one of his best seasons, if not his best season yet, and you still lost in the divisional round against the Bills. Where do the Ravens go from here? What piece are they missing? Is it a coaching thing? Bring me back into reality of the status of the Ravens, because I don't know what they're missing.
They're not missing anything. The problem was what I said at the top of the pod was that the Bills were able to prevent Henry from getting to 100 yards rushing, but Derrick Henry still had a superb game rushing. He was 16 rushes for 84 yards. That's a 5-yard average. The problem isn't what they're missing. The problem is the play calling. And Todd Monken had done so well this entire season. This entire season, he did well with saying, Lamar, I probably didn't say it in as many words, but saying, Lamar, I'm going to take the game off of your shoulders. I'm going to put you in positions where you can succeed. If Baltimore doesn't abandon the run game, and I thought this in the wild card round. This is why I thought Pittsburgh was going to beat Baltimore, because I thought Todd Monken was going to abandon the run game too soon, put the game on Lamar's shoulders, say, you are our quarterback, you're the MVP, go win it for us. But he waited a week. He waited a week in order to do that. And I don't understand it. Ever since Seattle lost the Super Bowl to New England, because they decided to put the ball in Russell Wilson's hands, other than just handing it off to, at that time, the best running back, one of the best running backs in the league, Marshawn Lynch. It is, and even going back to last year, when Kyle Shanahan and team decided to not use Christian McCaffrey. It doesn't make any sense to me why, if you have a running back who has absolutely destroyed defenses all season long, and you decide, no, this is our quarterback's turn, who gives a damn about whether or not who gets the credit? You win the game. Was it Jim Mora? You play to win the game. Like, that's it. That's all it is. Who cares who gets the credit? And we'll get into this when we talk about the Natty with Ohio State Notre Dame, but it's the same issue. You don't need more pieces, Baltimore. You need to stick with what works. You spent your entire season in a line of business, in the insurance business, so to speak, handing the ball off to Derrick Henry, and then you go to the divisional round and you're like, hey, let's invest in parachutes. Why? You were doing so well. You were doing so well with the formula that got you here. And that honestly is what, if there was anything that gave me pause about Buffalo not coming out of the divisional round as victors, it was how they were going to contain Derrick Henry. And they contained Derrick Henry, but really more so to the point to where Baltimore just stopped running the football. I don't understand it. Keep handing the rock off
JB,
to the guy who got you there.
If you were the GM for the Ravens, what do? Do you bring in another piece? Do you tell the head coach, hey, your coordinators are kind of the reason of your demise? Like, do you just say, you know what, it's just a schematics thing, we'll be better next year, and just run it back? What would you do?
If I'm Ernie DaCosta, I'm sitting there saying, look, guys, we did great. Let's run it back. There was nothing wrong with the formula. We just... There seems to be a virus around the NFL with offensive coordinators where at just the most inopportune times, we want to put the game on the shoulders of our quarterback. Who cares who wins the game? Who cares? Just win the game. Win the game. That's all you have to do. And so if I'm Ernie DaCosta, I'm not trying to change personnel. I'm not trying to change coordinators. We did so good. Lamar had his best season statistically in his entire career. He was in fuego this season. And all in large part due to what the existence of a man called Derrick Henry, who disappeared. He's not here anymore because Lamar's running the show. Like, it's just like, don't change anything. Just, I don't know, go to therapy? I don't know. Call Mike Shanahan and figure out how he was able to rely on Terrell Davis all those years. I don't know.
I mean, that is the point that I'm trying to get out of you, is that I don't know what you're missing because you had everything. You're not missing anything.
You're missing nothing.
Yeah, that's my point. You had the coordinator that was making the offense perfect for Lamar, where when the game didn't call for the ball to be in Lamar's hands, it didn't call for it, and Derrick Henry could carry the rock. You had all your pieces. You had Bateman. Lamar stayed healthy. Derrick Henry, as people don't acknowledge the fact that for running backs to stay healthy all year long is not that common, but you had that. So that's where I'm having an issue with where you go from here, because you had everything. You had your coordinators. You're not missing any pieces. So what is it that you need to change? Because one of the definitions of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. If you're going to run it back, you're almost expecting different results based off of the same thing. Maybe it's lessons learned and you'll be better next time. I'm a true believer in lessons learned and growing from them. That's fine. But in sports, you can't just stay stagnant and say, you know what, the same thing we had this year will work next year. That is my problem with it. And on the alternate side, moving on to the NFC side, the Lions, I think, were in the same position. They had, besides the injuries, and the injuries played a huge part in the lack of success for the Lions, based off of the expectations that the whole world had for that team. But now you've lost both coordinators.
Both.
Now you probably are going to lose a few key players because a lot of these players that stepped up to the role based off of injuries are going to be chasing the bag. If it wasn't this year that you made it all work, where do the Lions go at the same time? Because I don't expect their offense to be as explosive. Like I said, both of your coordinators are gone. Those coordinators were working, especially Aaron Glenn, with that defense.
Yeah.
With a patch job of a defense that he was making magic out of that defense. And at the same time with Ben Johnson, with the offense, you had everything in front of you. You made it work all year long. And you can't sit here and say, well, the injuries. Even though I say, yes, the injuries were a key factor even in just the Washington game. But you made it work all year. Made it work all year. Aaron Glenn made it work all year long. You finished with a 15-2 record during the regular season. So the injuries weren't that big of a problem.
Yeah.
If you couldn't make it this year, and now you're going to lose pieces, we already know that you've lost your coordinators. I feel like the Lions have missed their opportunity. I'm not saying they're going to fall to the basement of the NFC, or not even the basement of the NFC North. But if it wasn't this year, considering everything you had, what else are you missing? So it's this.
Right now, you're missing an offensive coordinator and a defensive coordinator. I mean, you're missing those two. But I think, and this is, if you watch the Hard Knocks from, I think, like 3 years ago of the Detroit Lions when they were going with their preseason, one of the big things that Dan Campbell, the head coach, preached was player type. So he didn't really care about, how big a player was, as long as they had the heart and they had the mindset to do what they were told when they were told to do it, and to do it at 100%. Always. And which is one of the reasons Manny Rodriguez is on that team, because if you remember watching that Hard Knocks, he was one of the ones that wasn't supposed to make it, but his heart, his passion, his devotion, and just his intellect and knowing how to play defense, his willingness to be rough when it called for it, that was there. I think if you're Dan Campbell, you have to, and you are going to lose some players. And honestly, like, if there's one player that I'm concerned with, if he stays not staying healthy, and this is the most ironic thing about Detroit's defense, is that Alex Anzalone stayed healthy. When he was with the Saints, he never stayed healthy. This dude, I swear, this dude sneezed and he was out for a year with an ACL tear somehow. Like, he stayed healthy and he was on this defense all year. That's how ironic this Detroit defense was this year, is that he stayed healthy.
Yeah.
If I'm Dan Campbell, I'm Brad Holmes, the GM of Detroit. I'm looking for guys who fit the Lions culture, who fit the scheme. And there is something brewing in Detroit where, and you're right, Detroit's not all of a sudden going to fall to the bottom of the NFC North. It's just, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The culture that Dan Campbell has established in this team with the players that Brad Holmes has brought in is phenomenal. It's something that Detroit has never experienced probably since the 50s. So this is going to be something to where I don't think it's going to be a huge loss for Dan Campbell, but he's got to continue his effort and his usual style of bringing in and evaluating players to come in. The problem with that is that he has leaned in the past a lot on his OCs. On his OCs, on his coordinators, on his assistant coaches. And now that you have arguably two of the biggest reasons they went 15-2, going to the Bears, going to the Jets, which are great hires, by the way, for both teams. Fantastic hires. The Jets screwed the Saints again twice. They already screwed the Saints once in 94 when they traded with him to go one pick up to get Aaron Glenn. And now they went and booked him so he can't be the head coach of the Saints. So thanks, Jets. I appreciate it.
Hey, you're going to get Mike McCarthy. You'll be fine.
Oh, you shut your beautiful mouth. Don't put that on me, Ricky Bobby. How dare you? How dare you? Help me, Tom Cruise. Help me, Oprah Winfrey. Like this, like Dan Campbell's next step is going to be able to find the guys who fit the system, and it's probably going to come internally. He's probably going to hire an OC internally, a DC internally, and then focus on bringing in the players who represent, who breathe the Lion culture.
I think the key thing that I want to notice or I want to see from the Lions is this is going to be the time for Dan Campbell to show that he is good because he is good. Strictly on the surface, he is who he is. And I'm not sitting here doubting him. But when you had Aaron Glenn and you had Ben Johnson as your coordinators, pretty much your entire tenure, Ben Johnson moved up internally after as a position coach and to the offensive coordinator position.
Yeah.
But now is going to be the time for Dan Campbell to show, as the management perspective, what he can actually do with the team when the coordinators aren't there to make the players work for what he wants to do. That is what I'm going to be paying attention to. Like I said, I'm not doubting him, but at the same time, when you lose two such good coordinators that you've had in your pocket for the last 3 and 4 years, respectively, Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, it's going to really show what type of head coach you really are. Because it's going to show, are you able to find good coordinators? Are you able to implement that system and that team that you want with the coordinators that you bring in? Is going to be the time to shine for Dan Campbell, and I'm curious to see how he steps up to the plate for that aspect alone. And like I said, I'm not sitting here and doubting Dan Campbell. I love what Dan Campbell has done for the Lions, but it's going to be the time to step up as a head coach and see what you can do with the Detroit Lions as a whole organization, because now it falls on him. Now it falls on him what management he's going to bring into the house that fits what players he has in house and what players they're going to bring into his organization. That being said, I want to ask you about those two coaches themselves, because you said both of those coaches are in good positions, and I have an argument about that. Ben Johnson to the Bears. You're happy with that signing, right?
So, out of the two, the one that I'm least confident in is Ben Johnson. So, and the reason I'm least confident in Ben Johnson is that, yes, he inherits a quarterback who has generational talent. Like, anyone who's ever listened to this podcast knows how much of a hard ass I've been on Caleb Williams. But that's never, ever stopped me from saying this dude has generational talent. It's all about the 5 inches between his ears. That's it. And he has made some dumbfounded plays and decisions throughout his rookie year. I get it. But the problem with Ben Johnson is that he now has to go out and try to find an offensive line that even closely resembles the one he had in Detroit. Because there's not one lineman in Chicago that could sit there and say, oh, I'm better than that one guy in Detroit. There's not one. So for Ben Johnson and company, Ryan Poles is going to have to do his work and try to find a guy. He's going to have his sign evaluators really dig down deep and try to find an offensive lineman or two that can actually develop into perennial Pro Bowlers or at least first teamers in order to help Caleb Williams feel more comfortable in the pocket. That's the biggest kind of hindrance for Ben Johnson in Chicago. It's not the quarterback. It's not the weapons. Maybe go out and get a running back. But the offensive line is something that needs to be addressed. It absolutely needs to be addressed. With Aaron Glenn and with the Jets, Aaron Glenn's going to clean house. And I can tell you this, if Aaron Rodgers stays with the Jets, Aaron Glenn ain't taking none of that. He ain't taking any of that. He's going to tell, Woody Johnson's going to say one word, Aaron Glenn's going to say, thank you for your input, go back upstairs. I'm running this football team. Like, this is like I'm really excited to see how Aaron Glenn turns around this franchise. He's going to have a long way to go, which probably explains the 5-year contract he got. but it's going to take some time. But that defense is already set in place. The Jets have a defense, but they're running on the field in offense with 0 out of 11 players. There's no one on the offensive side. Maybe Breece Hall, maybe, I don't know. He disappeared. Maybe Woody Johnson said something. But Aaron Glenn is going to be able to turn this franchise around. It's going to take a couple of years, I think, to be able to, because you're still playing in the AFC East. You still got to go up against Buffalo. You still got to do that. Mike Vrabel's in New England. Mike Vrabel's going to turn this franchise around in probably 1 year. And then who knows what Mike Daniel's going to do in Miami. That depends on what happens at the quarterback position, because I still don't believe in Tua. But out of the two, I believe more in Aaron Glenn. I believe Ben Johnson can do it in Chicago. He knows what it means and what it looks like to beat Matt LaFleur, which if you're Chicago, if you're a Bears fan, it's akin to being a Buckeye fan. You can lose 11 games as long as you beat Michigan. That's all that matters. If Ben Johnson can, I believe Ben Johnson can do it. It's just a matter of getting the right personnel there.
I tend to disagree with you a lot on this podcast, and this is one of the moments where I feel like I have to disagree with you the most in the last 50 episodes that we've had, 48 episodes that we've had. I feel like Ben Johnson is actually in a better position than Aaron Glenn with their respective teams. Why? Because Ben Johnson has to build an offense, and he's shown that he can build an offense. As a coordinator, he pretty much built that offense. The Bears' defense was already not stellar, but they already had a good defense last year and even this year throughout the entire year. The reason that the Bears stayed in a lot of the games that they ended up losing was because of their defense. I think Ben Johnson is in a better position because all is a big ask, but all he has to do is build an offense with a generational talent of Caleb Williams. Now on the other side, Aaron Glenn has taken a job that Woody Johnson offered to him. Woody Johnson is the owner. Unless Woody Johnson is going to pull a Jerry Jones and not hire a GM, I expect there to be a GM in the house in the next couple of weeks now that Aaron Glenn is hired as the head coach. And what is the typical clashing that we have when it comes to coaches is that the general manager and the head coach are on separate pages. If they bring in a general manager, my concern is that it's going to become this narrative of the general manager, whoever that ends up being. Aaron Glenn was not his hire. When it comes to that dynamic, a general manager, even a head coach, they want to hire their people to implement the type of structure and the type of system that they envision. And that goes all the way down the hierarchy of a sports team. A head coach wants to have the quarterback that he wants for his system. A general manager wants to have a head coach that will implement the same type of vision and culture that the general manager has in place. When an owner cuts out the middleman, which is the GM, and hires a head coach, like I said, the caveat is unless Woody Johnson is going to end up turning into a Jerry Jones and become the self-proclaimed GM. My concern comes from the management perspective on how that's going to look if the leash is shorter because the GM that comes in all of a sudden doesn't like the type of personality, the type of culture, the type of scheme that the head coach is planning in place. How short of a leash is Aaron Glenn going to have with the Jets? I was honestly surprised that Aaron Glenn took that type of job, considering what I'm bringing up, because he's such a good coach. I felt like he was going to go to an organization that just needed a head coach and had a strong GM in place. With this being the dynamic, I have reason for pause on what that's going to look like, which is why I feel like Aaron Glenn is actually in a worse position than Ben Johnson, because we know what Ben Johnson has to build, and Pools as a GM for the Bears knows why he hired Ben Johnson. The GM hired Ben Johnson. The owner hired Aaron Glenn. That is my issue with that dynamic. I have a big red flag flashing in front of my face when it comes to what he's gotten himself into whenever the owner is calling the shots at the head coaching position. And honestly, I'm not surprised, because Woody Johnson has kind of somewhat been acting like a shadow GM for the last couple of years, cutting out the head coach whenever he brought in Aaron Rodgers and making all these trades and whatnot whenever he had a GM in place. So it's not necessarily surprising that this is the approach they took, considering the commodity that Aaron Glenn was and how coveted he was as a head coach. I'm just curious how that's going to work, because of the fact that I still believe they're going to hire a GM. And is that GM going to have the patience for Aaron Glenn? And is that GM going to like what Aaron Glenn brings to the table? It just seems too soft of ice when it comes to the patience of those dynamics. But again, I could be wrong, and it could work really well. But I just have reason to worry about that hiring as itself, which is why I said I completely disagree with you on both aspects of both of those hiring.
The reason that I say Ben Johnson is look, I'm not going to say that neither. I think both of them are almost equal at having success where they're going to go. The thing with Aaron Glenn is Aaron Glenn played for the Jets. Aaron Glenn knows what it's like to have success in Florham Park. He knows what it's like to have success as a Jet. He's been there. He has experienced it. And I get Woody Johnson hired him. That people said the same thing about when Sean Payton was hired by the Saints. They said Tom Benson hired Sean Payton in order just to be able to have a puppet. Well, Sean Payton did amazing things in New Orleans, and he's doing great things in Denver. And to your point about the GM, I mean, Lance Newmark, the assistant GM of Washington, interviewed for the GM position with the Jets. And Adam Peters did wonders with Washington this year. And if Lance Newmark picked up anything from Adam Peters, it's to be able to how to implement the right personnel on your team. Now, I'm not saying Ben Johnson's going to have a hard time of it. I'm just saying that out of the two, I think Aaron Glenn understands the assignment more. He's from the Jets. He played 9 seasons with the Jets. He was drafted in 94 by the Jets, played there to 2001. He understands the culture. He knows what it's like to be able to be a winner there. And so I'm not sitting there saying that Woody Johnson isn't going to do his idiotic things like he does all the time and say the idiotic things that he says. But I'm saying Aaron Glenn is there for a reason. He's there for a reason. And I honestly don't think Woody Johnson's just out there just to put on a spectacle. If that was the case, he would have handed Deion Sanders the $200 million contract and said, Deion, why don't you come here? We'll draft 6th Avenue Shador, and then we'll do whatever we do in New York, whatever. But he hired Aaron Glenn for a reason. And if he's bringing in somebody from the Washington franchise who under this new ownership knows how to win, then I have to believe that Woody Johnson is finally maybe trying to, revert the trend. I don't know. But there's little things there that are making me think there could be hope there. But with Ben Johnson, Chicago, you asked me, Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn. I said Aaron Glenn. I don't think Ben Johnson's going to have a hard time in Chicago. He's got the pieces. He just needs to be able to get an offensive line. That defense is already in place. The Jets' defense is already in place. They've got nobody on offense except Garrett Mitchell and maybe Breece Hall. That's it. Those are the only pieces they have. So Aaron Glenn has his work cut out for him. But if Woody Johnson brings in the right personnel, a.k.a. maybe Lance Newmark, a Washington guy who was observing Adam Peters this whole time, maybe, I don't know. But I'm saying I think Aaron Glenn has got the best shot because I think he's under the least amount of pressure because it's the Jets. it's still the Jets. All you have to do is break even. That's all you have to do. It's like having a wife saying you can go to Vegas, just don't lose anything. That's all you got to do. That's what Aaron Glenn's married to the woman who says go to Vegas, just don't lose nothing. I think Aaron Glenn has the capability and the ability to lose nothing.
Yeah, I don't know. The big maybes are the reason for my concern because history has shown me that Woody Johnson likes grabbing his big ladle and stirring the team dynamics whenever he should
He
just
does.
be sitting in his suite, lining his pockets with money. It gives me cause for worry. That's the only thing that I have about that dynamic. It just gives me cause for worry because very few times do you see an owner hire a head coach and that go really well. But JB,
Let's move on to the Natty.
let's move on to the Natty because we had a national championship in the college football playoff, 12-team playoff, and we have an Ohio State national champions. First off, I want to ask you, the game itself, was it or was it not what we expected to see out of both of those teams?
It was less than what I expected from Ohio State, more than what I expected from Notre Dame. And not in
Really?
terms of Ohio State winning the game. I
Right.
said from the very onset of this college
Yep.
football playoff that the one team that needed an identity and didn't have one, and if they found it, they would run the gauntlet, was Ohio State, because they were easily the most talented team in the country on both sides of the ball. And after what they did to Tennessee, I had no doubt they were going to do it against Oregon, against Texas, and against Notre Dame. With that said, I was a little disappointed that it took until the end of the fourth quarter for Chip Kelly to dial up a play to go to Jeremiah Smith downfield. When Jeremiah Smith, I think, had one target in the second half, I'm like, he's your second best player. Throw him the football. But more than I expected from Notre Dame, and especially because Riley Leonard was really, outside of Jaden Greathouse, Riley Leonard was the only, and I always sound drunk when I say Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard was the only player who really had any impact on that game for Notre Dame on the offensive side of the ball. He was the only one. And clearly, this dude was gassed in the first half of the game. He was gassed. You could see him after every run that he took. But I would say Ohio State underperformed. Notre Dame overperformed. But Ohio State didn't underperform in the way where I didn't think they would win. They just underperformed in their scheme.
And see, once again, I disagree with you. I think Notre Dame did less than what I personally expected them to do, which was keep a game close. And there's people, we can look at the final score and say that was a reasonably close game. I expected it to be a closer game. Ohio State did what they've been doing the entire playoffs. If it wasn't for some miscues, it would have been a bigger blowout than what the final score showed. And here's my thing about both of those teams. Ohio State adapted really well to Notre Dame. Notre Dame had a 12-13 play drive to open the game where they scored a touchdown. Ohio State only followed that up by scoring 31 unanswered points or 28 unanswered points. I've never seen a team adjust so quickly on the fly from one play to another like I saw Ohio State do against Notre Dame. I swear to you, when I watched the first drive of Notre Dame's opening drive, I thought to myself, okay, if Notre Dame does this the entire game, they have a really good chance. And instantly that got squashed. And I've never seen the adjustments be from one drive to another. It's common for teams to make adjustments at halftime. and come out with a completely different scheme, a completely different play calling in the second half. I don't think I've seen it happen with it from one drive to another, because after that first drive, the Ohio State defense completely shut down Notre Dame. And like I said, they scored 31 unanswered points, and everything that Notre Dame was doing from that point on, Ohio State was squashing so fast, to the point where I was watching the game, but I was on my phone at the same time. Every time Notre Dame had the ball, if I looked down at my phone, the next time I was looking up, they were punting the ball and Ohio State was already driving within field goal range. It was just that quick of an explosive offense, and that underwhelming of a Notre Dame defense. I really thought Notre Dame was going to be more competitive in that game when it came to their defense, which was what was carrying them through the playoffs to make it to the national championship. I thought their defense was going to be able to push back against the Ohio State offense, and that didn't happen. And that is the part that I was caught off guard by, because you said it all the entire playoffs. Ohio State's offense was explosive when Chip Kelly knew what type of offense he could run and how he could make the calls, call the plays that he wanted to based off of what he was seeing. They were very explosive. I just really thought Notre Dame was going to be able to keep up with them because of what all the signs and flashes of dominance they had shown throughout the previous 3 games that Notre Dame had played. I didn't see that at all. But at the same time, that is not because of Notre Dame. That was strictly based off of what I saw, was strictly because Ohio State was just so dominant, so adaptable, and so easily they found it easy for them to be able to change to what they were seeing. And it blew my mind, the level of dominance that Ohio State displayed. And like I said, the final score shows a closer game as I was watching the game, what that game felt like. It felt like it was a blowout the entire game after that first drive. And besides the fact that Notre Dame got explosive plays in the third and the fourth quarter to kind of keep it close within the margins of what people would consider a close game, it didn't really feel like that to me. It really felt like Ohio State was just cruising to the finish line because they had figured out what Notre Dame was going to do on both sides of the ball. And they ended up just pulling back on the pedal on their offensive side. And like I said, if it wasn't because they missed some plays, there was some deep plays where the quarterback kind of just barely missed some touchdowns and some explosive plays across the board. If it wasn't because of those miscues, this game wouldn't have been as close as that final score showed. It was not what I wanted to see out of a national championship at all.
I feel like you just proved every point I made. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a mathologist, but I feel like you just proved every point I made about Ohio State underperforming and Notre Dame overperforming. There was when Chip Kelly dialed up that play to go downfield on 3rd and short to Jeremiah Smith. I tweeted, I said, there's no way Al Golden and company did not see that coming. There's no way that they just left Jeremiah Smith one-on-one downfield. Because there was, and look, I mean, the first half was just absolute, it was a, what's the word that the kids use? It was an absolute just schooling that Ohio State put on Notre Dame in the first half. The second half, Ohio State kind of let off. They stopped blitzing. They let Riley Leonard take his shots, running downfield. The problem with Notre Dame is that look, I get it. Jeremiah Love wasn't fantastic in the playoffs, but why stop handing him the ball? Why? I've been rooting for Ohio State this whole time, but watching this game, I was like, why are you not handing the ball off to Jeremiah? Let the bullfrog Let the bullfrog run. Let him run. Let him break free. Give him an opportunity to make some plays. But they kept doing this RPO where Riley Leonard would just keep the ball and just run up the middle for 8-9 yards, and then eventually became 5 to 6 yards. And then they opened up the offense and they said, let's just chuck the ball downfield to Jaden Greathouse. Let's see what he can do. And he did great things because we know if you have the last name Greathouse, you're going to do great things. Okay, 50-50 shot. Your last name's great. You're going to do some pretty good things. So that didn't surprise me at all, especially what he did against Penn State. But it's one of those things where I think Notre Dame fell short in thinking that they could just go ahead and abandon the run game, the traditional run game, and put the game on the shoulders of their quarterback. And so, and like I said, Riley Leonard looked gassed in the first half of the game. He looked gassed. And so you bring him out there and you do the same thing again, except now you're throwing the ball downfield. You know, and honestly, when Notre Dame was doing what they were doing against Ohio State defense, I thought it was just all miracle plays. Because it was just Riley Leonard throwing it up. He was just throwing it up. See what Jaden can do. See if Greathouse can bring it down. That was it. But I never believed for 1 second Ohio State was going to lose that game. I thought in the second half, especially that third quarter, they really just let up. They just let up. And look, you can sit there and say all day long, field goal kickers, whatever, they're not that important. Notre Dame makes that field goal. I mean, it's a one possession game. I'm only bringing up the obvious, but so Ohio State wins that game, and yeah, it was 34-23, but I feel like that game was a lot closer than it should have been. If there was one game that Ohio State should have just dominated, it was this game. It was this game. But whether it be Riley Leonard's, just perseverance, Marcus Freeman's hairline, I don't know. Something about Notre Dame just woke up in that second half and they're like, this is for Coach Freeman's hair. Go get him. But look, all that matters in the end is Ohio State won. I was right in the fact that they, since the Tennessee game, through Oregon, through Texas, which Texas was a much tougher opponent than Notre Dame. Let's not forget that. People like to write off Notre Dame's defense. Notre Dame's defense is incredible. Texas's defense was elite. And what Ohio State did against Texas's defense, it was what gave me a lot of confidence in them being able to defeat Notre Dame. They did. I just feel like they underperformed. They slowed down.
Ultimately, what we have in front of us is Ohio State as a national champion, with all the fans having to have a midlife crisis or a crisis of whatever they want to call it, because they lost to Michigan and they ended up winning the national championship. It's not the worst situation to be in. I know the rivalry runs far and deep into the blood of those fan bases. But we have Ohio State as a national champion. You called it, JB. You got your prediction right. You called the dominance of Ohio State, and we're sitting here asking, where does Ohio State go from here? Because with the 12-team playoff, I don't think it's going to be that easy for a dynasty to really emerge, considering how all the rankings line up. But we'll let Ohio State have their time to shine. And I'm not taking away from Ohio State. They truly deserve the national championship, and they dominated throughout the entire playoff to get to that point. That being said, JB, as we close out our episode, we can't close out without knocking out our fix of 6. JB, take it away with our fix of 6.
JB's Fix of 6 is going to center around the Baseball Hall of Fame announcement that happened on Tuesday. JB's Fix of 6, number 3. Billy Wagner made it. He made it, not just made it, on his 10th and final year of eligibility before he would float around in an ethosphere before the Eras Committee would maybe decide to let one of the greatest closers, and not even greatest, one of the most dominant left-handed pitchers to ever make the Hall of Fame or ever play the game. Billy Wagner deserved to be in the Hall of Fame years ago, but because of a logjam and because of Hall of Fame voters who believe in a small hall, Billy Wagner didn't make it. Billy Wagner finally made it, and he is all deserving. Anyone who is my age, I'm 39, grew up watching baseball and knew the moment Billy Wagner came into the game, it was lights out. It wasn't Sandman time, but it was Wagner time. And Billy would close out the game, no problem. Congratulations, Billy Wagner. I'm happy for you. JB's Fix of 6, number 2. CC Sabathia. I never had any doubt that you would make it. Never in a million years did I think you would make it. Did I think you'd make it this fast? No. Because Andy Pettitte still isn't even in the Hall of Fame. Why is Andy Pettitte not in the Hall of Fame? His numbers are nearly identical to CC Sabathia's. Andy Pettitte was just as dominant in the postseason. Andy Pettitte was the reason the Yankees won so many championships in the 90s and the early 2000s. He was the reason. Why is Andy Pettitte struggling so much to make it? And CC makes it so fast. I don't understand it. I don't get it. I understand people have a problem with Andy Pettitte and his demeanor on the mound. He wasn't a bulldog. He just is so calm demeanored. He just went out and played the game. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do that. You're supposed to go out there and dominate, no matter what your demeanor is. I get it. CC and company just did great things on the mound. They did great things in the community. But this is not the Hall of Community. This is the Hall of Fame. Let Andy Pettitte into the Hall of Fame. JB's Fix of 6, number 3. Whoever the voter is who looked at their ballot, saw Ichiro's name and said, nah, never mind. Who are you? You need to pay for crimes against humanity. Donald Trump should sign an executive order demanding you to give an answer for why you did not vote for Ichiro to make the Hall of Fame. What is wrong with you? What is the matter with you? Ichiro was one of the most prolific hitters in the history of baseball. I don't give a damn that he started in the major leagues at 27. He had 1,000 hits already. Who does that? Nobody except Ichiro. Ichiro Suzuki deserved to be the second unanimous player to be elected into the Hall of Fame, and you ruined it. That's on your head. Manny, take it away.
JB, don't you dare disrespect CC and take credit away from his dominance as a pitcher.
I'm not. CC was so dominant. He was so dominant. Andy Pettitte was just as dominant.
You took away the spotlight from
CC. Andy Pettitte was just as dominant.
You took away the spotlight from CC and turned it around and made it about somebody else.
Away from CC. He put on the Hall of Fame jersey. He's being inducted. The point I'm making is Andy was just as dominant. Why is he not in?
Your Fix of 6 should have been strictly about CC, not about how CC kind of shines a light onto somebody else. CC deserves it on a standalone.
Wrong. No. This is my Fix of 6. Okay?
Well,
all right, this is my drug addiction. This is what I need.
On Manny's fix of 6 after JB stresses me out. Manny's number 3 fix of 6. We have the NFL awards announced. And I have a red flag to shine onto one specific team that has a whole lot of nominees onto these awards. What team am I talking about? The Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals have Joe Burrow as an MVP. We have Joe Burrow as the Offensive Player of the Year. We have Hendrickson as a Defensive Player of the Year. Joe Burrow as the Comeback Player of the Year. The one thing that didn't happen for the Bengals was a playoff berth. For all the awards and attention that the Bengals are getting in the awards season, this shines a light onto the fact that coaching matters, and we need to sit here and have a discussion about what that means for the Cincinnati Bengals. Zach Taylor's still the head coach, and I'm not taking anything away from him. But at the same time, Zach Taylor, if you have such an explosive offense when it comes to Joe Burrow having a great MVP caliber season, which according to the nominees, he had an MVP caliber season, why didn't you fire or make changes on the defensive side of the ball? Week 4 of the season, week 6 of the season, when you saw that your defense was having so many issues, it breaks my heart that we have to sit here and talk about how many players and how many different awards the Bengals players are up for when they didn't even make the playoffs. Coaching matters, players in the right systems matter, but my one caveat, wrapping it all back around in a nice bow, it was recently announced that Cincinnati was hiring the Notre Dame defensive coordinator as their defensive coordinator. And if history shows that schemes matter and schemes translate, I have a feeling that we'll be having a whole different conversation about next year's playoffs and the status of the Cincinnati Bengals next year, because I have a feeling that defense is going to step up to the plate way more than they did this year. On that note, on Manny's fix of 6, number 2, JB hinted at it. We're talking Patriots. Why? Because the Patriots have announced that they are hiring Josh Daniels as their offensive coordinator after they brought in Mike Vrabel as their head coach. Here's my thing about that hire. Why are we treating Josh McDaniels as the ugly girlfriend in high school that just dated the same group of best friends? Really? This is where we are? Josh McDaniels has had so many opportunities, so many chances to be a coach. We can't find any other coordinator that's going to be better than Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels looked good with Tom Brady. Josh McDaniels didn't look good in the multiple stints that he had as a head coach of the Broncos and the Raiders. Why are we acting like the pool of offensive coordinators is so small that we're going to rotate the ugly girlfriend in high school to bring back an old head back into the system? This is giving me vibes of a team that just wants to bring in all the old players, run it back with all their previous previous personnel, as if the people that have left were the issue. Let me tell you, Bill Belichick left, and I can 1,000% assure you that him leaving was not the cause for the problems with the Patriots. But I just don't understand why, out of all the candidates, out of all the explosive offense that we have in college and in NFL, we are hiring Josh McDaniels as a Patriots offensive coordinator. That just blows my mind. And on Manny's number 1 fix of 6, I am bringing it all the way back around to the top of our episode where we were talking about the Bills. The Bills Mafia has now donated, last time I checked, close to $60,000 to an organization that is backed by Mark Andrews out of the Baltimore Ravens. I can't understand. I can't figure out what the Bills Mafia actually is, because the Bills Mafia is arguably one of the gnarliest, most aggressive, more toughest skinned fan bases in the entire NFL if not for the entire sports world. And then you beat a team and your response is to go donate thousands of dollars to the players organization of the team that you just beat. I'm not hating on them. I just want to understand where the mindset is. I love you, Bills fans. What is going on with you all? You guys are like, I don't even have a perfect metaphor for what the Bills Mafia is, but Bills fans, keep doing what you're doing. JB and I are cheering for the Bills to make a Super Bowl. And you know what? If your response to beating a team is feeling bad and donating to charity on the players' behalf, I am all here for it. But Bills Mafia, there's no fan base that comes close to the type of personalities that you have up in Buffalo, New York, and keep doing what you're doing. And there is a whole country that is cheering for the Bills to defeat the Chiefs dynasty and stopping a three-peat from happening in our NFL world. And that is JB's and Manny's Fix of 6. Do you like how I tied that all back together? Brought it all back?
I love how you did all the things. Now, I will say, for Josh McDaniels, let's not pretend he didn't have success as an OC. And I've said for my entire life, there are some coaches who are just better suited as coordinators. Steve Spagnuolo tried it as a head coach. He is phenomenal as a DC for Kansas City. Josh McDaniels tried it as a head coach twice, I believe, and he has failed miserably twice. Let's not forget the success he had as an offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. I also chuckled because I'm like, I thought Bill Belichick wasn't the head coach of New England. I'm waiting for Matt Patricia to be brought back to be DC. Like, this is... But Josh McDaniels, I think he can still do some good things. Oh, my wife's cooking dirty rice. I can smell it. It smells so good. But, and then to comment on your Bills on your Bills take, this is a fan base who leaps on tables. Okay?
That's true.
Let's not...
Yeah.
Look, I went to high school with some bipolar people, all right? You never sit there and just make fun of the bipolar people in front of them, all right? The Bills fans, they do some wild things, all right?
Yep.
If they want to give to Mark Andrews Foundation as a troll, or even out of the goodness of their hearts, you don't question it because you don't know what they're going to do because they jump on tables.
Yeah, and they volunteer to sweep the stadium whenever it snows too much for them to be able to sit in their chairs. They're just a... You are right. They are
It's a fun fan base. It really is.
Yeah,
I should be a Bills fan.
Fan base. I'm just trying to understand what... I've never seen bipolar being encompassed into a whole community of fans. I've seen it in one-off cases. I've never seen you become a Bills fan and you become bipolar because you become a Bills fan. That's just not how that tends to work in my brain.
Well, it's New York. We've seen the videos at train stations, okay? We know what happens, all right? It's not far-fetched.
Like I said, I'm not hating on the Bills fans. I love how they always treat the teams that they beat in it. Like you said, maybe it's trolling, maybe it's just out of the goodness of their heart, but I am not hating on it. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm all here for it. JB, we are done. Tell me what you are drinking.
I am drinking this blackened cask strength. It is a whiskey that is collabed with James Hetfield of Metallica. 120 proof. I'm going to say 121 because it's 120.8. So I know a lot of billionaires who don't round down. So I'm going to round up to 121. And then what I'm smoking is a Drew Estates 20-acre farm. It's a Toro. And it is absolutely delicious. It is not, for those of you who smoke Drew Estate cigars, you know how they wrap them too tight and you have to keep lighting it in order to keep it lit. This was one of the exceptions. I lit it maybe I think 2 or 3 times. That's because I stopped smoking it. But it's been a very good smoke, and I'm gonna continue with it with my wife downstairs. Manny, what were you drinking?
JB, I found a great bottle at not sponsored Costco. I found a bottle of Kirkland brand old fashioned mix.
I've had that.
And let me-
It's tasty.
It is so good. As you can tell, we bought it a few days ago and it is just about gone. Maybe another session or 2 left in that bottle, but it is quite tasty. I poured myself a couple glasses through the entire episode and I had not one complaint about it. It is so smooth. It has just that fiery taste behind it from that whiskey taste, but it doesn't burn your palate. It doesn't make me feel like I'm going to spit fire after I take every single drink. Overall, a satisfied customer out of the Kirkland old-fashioned bottle from Costco. Again, not sponsored, but still have to give him a shout out for a great quality make. And on that note, JB, we are done. We are on the road to the championship round for the NFL, and we will be talking Super Bowl on the other end of our next episode. JB, close us out. Get us out of here.
Yes. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, at Box Scores and Bourbon. You can find us on the and even on YouTube. And you can you're watching us live. And you can also find us on TikTok, X, and Instagram. BSB Sports 24. Manny, go ahead.
Thank you for everybody that joined us on this live episode. We welcome the future live episodes that we will be having. We love all the participation that you guys give us. Keep contributing on our content. Keep giving us your attention. Give us the hour and a half that we ask out of you on a weekly basis. Until we ask that out of you once again. Cheers, everyone. See you next week.
Cheers. And if you want to see us live on TikTok, make it 1,000 followers because TikTok is weird that way. Stay thirsty, folks.